Silence, exhaustion, emotional numbness. Those are often the first signs an empath is reaching their breaking point. Not through anger, not through dramatic endings, but through quiet emotional disappearance. Every day, countless empaths keep carrying the pain of others while secretly drowning inside themselves, smiling while exhausted, listening while overwhelmed, loving while emotionally collapsing. And the saddest truth is, many of them never realize their kindness is slowly becoming self destruction. Deeply sensitive people often absorb stress, tension, and emotional pain without noticing the damage it causes over time. Eventually, a moment arrives that changes everything. A painful realization forms inside them. Saving everyone else is costing me my peace. That single decision becomes the turning point that finally protects their energy. In this video, you will uncover the hidden behaviors silently draining empaths every day, the emotional trap that keeps them overgiving, and the powerful mindset shift that helps them reclaim their peace without losing their kindness. Some of these truths are rarely talked about because emotionally exhausted empaths usually suffer in silence. But once these patterns become visible, life never feels the same again. Stay until the end because the final lesson may completely change the way you protect your energy, your relationships, and your emotional well being forever. Welcome to Empath Energy, a place for deep emotional truths, healing, and personal transformation. Subscribe now and begin protecting the energy nobody else can protect for you. Heavy energy, unspoken tension, hidden sadness. Empaths notice these things almost instantly. Even inside rooms where nobody says a single word, they can still feel when something is wrong. That is because empaths do not only listen to people's words, they absorb emotions, moods, and emotional shifts that most people completely overlook. A small change in someone's voice can stay in an empath's mind for hours. A fake smile can make them feel uneasy all day. Deeply sensitive people naturally pick up emotional signals without even trying. And over time, this constant emotional absorption becomes exhausting in ways many people never understand. Most empaths spend years believing they are simply too sensitive. But the truth goes much deeper than that. Their nervous system is constantly reacting to the emotional energy around them. Crowded places feel draining. Negative conversations feel heavy. Toxic people leave emotional residue that lingers long after the interaction ends. Even when life appears calm on the outside, many empaths silently carry emotional pressure inside themselves every single day. The hardest part is that empaths rarely know where their emotions truly come from anymore. Sometimes the anxiety they feel does not even belong to them. Sometimes the sadness weighing on them started from another person's pain, yet they still carry it like it is their responsibility to fix. This creates emotional overload, a type of silent exhaustion that slowly drains their mental peace, focus, and emotional stability. Many empaths become emotional caretakers without realizing it. They listen deeply, comfort endlessly, stay emotionally available for everyone. But while they are busy helping others breathe emotionally, they quietly forget to breathe themselves. And little by little, their inner world starts becoming heavier than anyone around them can see. Constant pressure, endless emotional responsibility, quiet guilt that never fully disappears. This is the hidden weight many empaths carry every single day. Somewhere along the way, they started believing that love means always being available, always understanding, always sacrificing their own comfort to protect someone else's feelings. And because of that, many empaths slowly lose the ability to separate compassion from self abandonment. They feel responsible for fixing moods they did not create, responsible for keeping relationships together, responsible for making sure nobody feels hurt, rejected, or alone. Even when they are emotionally exhausted themselves, they still keep giving. Rest starts feeling uncomfortable to them. Saying no feels cruel. Choosing distance feels selfish. Many empaths carry guilt for things most people would never apologize for. They apologize for needing space, apologize for protecting their peace, apologize for being emotionally tired after carrying everyone else for too long. Over time, this creates a dangerous pattern where their worth becomes connected to how much they can emotionally provide for others. That is why so many empaths attract emotionally draining relationships. Their kindness becomes easy to depend on. People start expecting unlimited patience, unlimited understanding, unlimited emotional access. And because empaths fear disappointing others, they keep stretching themselves beyond healthy limits. They answer messages while mentally exhausted, stay in conversations that drain them, continue helping people who rarely ask how they are doing in return. Slowly, overgiving stops being something they do. It becomes who they are: the helper, the fixer, the emotional support system for everyone around them. But beneath that caring exterior, many empaths secretly feel invisible. Their pain stays hidden because they became experts at carrying emotional weight silently, and eventually their soul begins craving something they rarely give themselves: rest, protection, and emotional peace without guilt. Endless chances, endless understanding, endless emotional patience. This is the trap many empaths fall into without realizing how deeply it is hurting them. Because empaths naturally see the wounded side of people, they often stay connected to toxic individuals far longer than they should. They notice hidden pain behind bad behavior. They see childhood wounds behind emotional manipulation. They recognize sadness behind anger. And because of that, they convince themselves that love, patience, and understanding will eventually heal the situation. So they keep waiting, keep forgiving, keep hoping the person will finally change. Many empaths become emotionally attached to someone's potential instead of their reality. They focus on the rare moments of kindness while ignoring the repeated patterns of emotional damage. Deep inside, they believe giving up on someone makes them cold or heartless, so they continue pouring emotional energy into relationships that constantly drain them. But the painful truth is that not everyone wants healing. Some people simply want comfort, attention, validation, or emotional access without ever taking responsibility for the pain they cause. This is where emotional survival slowly turns into emotional sacrifice. The empath begins abandoning their own needs just to keep the connection alive. They tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. They silence their feelings to protect someone else's emotions. They carry conversations, repair arguments, and absorb emotional chaos over and over again. And after a while, exhaustion becomes their normal state. The saddest part is that many empaths do not even realize how much damage has already been done until their energy completely collapses. Their body feels tired all the time, their mind becomes overwhelmed, their peace disappears. Yet they still keep trying to save people who are slowly destroying them emotionally, because for many empaths, walking away feels more painful than staying hurt. And that is exactly why so many of them remain trapped inside emotionally one-sided relationships for far too long. Slowly, a painful awareness begins forming inside the empath, not through one dramatic moment, but through repeated disappointment, repeated exhaustion, repeated emotional imbalance. They start noticing that they are always the person others run to during difficult times, always the listener during emotional breakdowns, always the calm voice during chaos. They remember birthdays, comfort pain, forgive mistakes, and carry conversations that nobody else wants to handle. Yet when they quietly begin falling apart inside, very few people truly notice. Even fewer stay long enough to help carry their pain. That realization changes something deep within them, because for the first time, the empath begins questioning relationships they once defended so strongly. They start seeing how often they were emotionally available for people who were rarely available in return. They notice how some connections only survive when they are the one giving energy, patience, and understanding. The moment they become tired, distant, or emotionally overwhelmed, the relationship suddenly feels different, quieter, colder, less supportive. And this is where the deepest heartbreak begins for many empaths. They realize that some people loved their kindness more than they loved them. Some people became comfortable receiving endless emotional support without ever asking how much it was costing the empath internally. The empath starts replaying years of emotional sacrifice in their mind, recognizing how often they ignored their own exhaustion just to keep others comfortable. Eventually, a difficult truth becomes impossible to ignore. The people I keep saving are often the people draining me. That sentence hits deeply because empaths rarely expect the people they love to become the source of their emotional exhaustion. But once this pattern becomes visible, their entire perspective begins changing. They become more aware of emotional imbalance, more aware of one sided effort, more aware of how constantly rescuing others slowly pulled them away from themselves. And for the first time in a very long time, the empath begins craving something unfamiliar, emotional safety instead of emotional survival. Then comes the moment that quietly changes the empath forever. A moment that does not look dramatic from the outside, but internally feels life changing. After years of overgiving, over explaining, and emotionally carrying everyone else, the empath finally reaches a limit they can no longer ignore. Not because they stopped loving people, not because they became cold, but because they finally understand that constantly abandoning themselves is slowly destroying their peace. And somewhere deep inside, a powerful decision begins forming. I will stop sacrificing my emotional well being just to keep others comfortable. That decision becomes the turning point. For the first time, the empath starts listening to their own exhaustion instead of ignoring it. They begin noticing how often they said yes while wanting to say no. How often they tolerated disrespect to avoid disappointing someone. How often they betrayed their own needs to maintain relationships that only survived through their emotional effort. And once this awareness becomes clear, something inside them begins changing permanently. This transformation is not built from anger. It is not revenge. It is self respect finally waking up after years of silence. The empath slowly starts creating boundaries that once felt impossible. They stop answering every emotional demand immediately. Stop feeling responsible for fixing every broken person around them. Stop apologizing for needing rest, space, or peace. At first, this feels uncomfortable because many empaths were conditioned to believe their value comes from how much they can emotionally provide for others. But over time, they begin realizing something powerful. Protecting their energy is not selfish, it is necessary. And strangely, some people react negatively to this new version of the empath. The moment unlimited access disappears, certain relationships begin changing. Guilt appears, manipulation appears, distance appears. Because some people were attached to the empath's self sacrifice, not their healing. But the empath keeps evolving anyway, slowly becoming calmer, stronger, more emotionally aware, not harder, not colder, just finally unwilling to lose themselves in the process of loving everyone else. Few things feel more uncomfortable to an empath than setting boundaries. Even after years of emotional exhaustion, many still hesitate before saying no. Their heart immediately worries about hurting someone's feelings. They fear sounding rude, distant, or uncaring. Because empaths naturally feel other people's emotions so deeply, disappointing someone can feel emotionally painful to them. Even necessary distance creates guilt inside their mind. So instead of protecting themselves, they often stay available far beyond their emotional limit. This is why so many empaths silently tolerate behavior that slowly drains them. They answer calls when they need rest, stay in conversations that overwhelm them, continue giving emotional energy even when they are completely depleted inside. Deep down, many empaths associate boundaries with rejection. They fear becoming the type of person who once hurt them. So they keep choosing comfort for others while abandoning comfort for themselves. But eventually, life teaches them a difficult truth. Without boundaries, empathy becomes emotional self destruction. Healthy empathy was never meant to mean unlimited access. Real compassion does not require constant sacrifice. In fact, boundaries are one of the purest forms of self respect an empath can develop. They protect emotional stability, mental peace, inner balance. They allow the empath to care without completely losing themselves in other people's chaos. At first, boundaries feel unnatural because the empath is not used to prioritizing their own emotional needs. Some people may even accuse them of changing, becoming selfish, becoming cold. But the empath slowly begins realizing something important. The people who truly care about them will respect their limits, not punish them for having any. And with time, the guilt slowly becomes weaker. The empath starts understanding that saying no is not cruelty, taking space is not betrayal, protecting peace is not selfishness, it is emotional survival. Because a heart that constantly gives without protection eventually becomes exhausted beyond recognition. And for the first time in their life, the empath begins learning that preserving their energy matters just as much as protecting everyone else's feelings. A quiet shift begins happening once the empath starts healing emotionally. The endless explaining slowly stops. The constant need to defend every choice, every feeling, every boundary begins fading away. For years, many empaths exhaust themselves trying to make everyone understand their heart. They explain their intentions repeatedly, overanalyze every misunderstanding, carry guilt for being misinterpreted. They spend so much energy trying to prove they are caring, loyal, and genuine that they barely notice how emotionally draining it becomes. But eventually, something changes inside them. They realize that people who truly care will not require endless explanations just to respect their feelings, and people committed to misunderstanding them would never fully understand anyway. That realization becomes incredibly freeing. The empath slowly stops chasing validation from people who only appreciate them when they are sacrificing themselves. They stop begging to be emotionally seen by people who constantly overlook their pain. They begin recognizing how much anxiety came from trying to control other people's opinions, trying to keep everyone comfortable, trying to avoid disappointing anyone at all costs. And for the first time, silence starts feeling safer than over-explaining. Not cold silence, protective silence, peaceful silence. The empath learns that not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding requires emotional exhaustion. Not every relationship deserves unlimited emotional access. Instead of constantly proving their worth, they start conserving their energy for people who genuinely value their presence without needing endless justification. This transformation often surprises the people around them. The empath who once overextended themselves emotionally becomes calmer, more reserved, more selective with their energy. They no longer argue endlessly to be understood, no longer chase people who pull away, no longer abandon themselves for approval, and slowly peace becomes more important than being liked. That is one of the deepest signs an empath is healing. Because emotionally mature empathy no longer seeks constant reassurance from the outside world. It becomes grounded internally, quietly strong, quietly aware. The empath finally understands that protecting their inner peace matters more than winning every misunderstanding or maintaining every connection. One of the hardest parts of healing for an empath is realizing that not everyone celebrates their growth. The moment they begin protecting their energy, certain relationships start changing almost immediately. People who once enjoyed unlimited emotional access suddenly become frustrated by boundaries. The empath who used to answer every call now takes space. The person who always overgave now starts choosing rest, and strangely, this shift can make others uncomfortable. Not because the empath became cruel, but because their self-sacrifice is no longer available in the same way. Many empaths feel shocked when people react negatively to their healing. They expected understanding, respect, support. Instead, they sometimes receive guilt, distance, passive aggression, or emotional manipulation. This is because some relationships were built around the empath constantly giving while asking for very little in return. Once balance enters the relationship, the dynamic begins changing. And not everyone benefits from that change. At first, this phase feels incredibly lonely. The empath begins questioning themselves, wondering whether boundaries made them selfish, wondering whether protecting their peace hurt too many people. Old habits try pulling them back into over-explaining and emotional rescuing again, because loneliness can feel unfamiliar after spending so long emotionally attached to everyone else's needs. But deep inside, something also feels different, lighter, calmer, more honest. For the first time, the empath starts seeing which relationships survive without self-abandonment. They begin recognizing who truly values them beyond their emotional labor. And while some connections fade away, The empath slowly creates space for healthier relationships built on mutual care instead of emotional dependence. Healing teaches the empath a painful but freeing truth. Some people only felt comfortable around the version of them that never said no, the version that tolerated everything, the version that ignored its own exhaustion to maintain connection. But growth changes that completely. And although this stage can feel isolating at first, the empath slowly begins discovering that temporary loneliness is far less painful than constantly betraying themselves just to keep others close. For many empaths, kindness became connected to sacrifice from a very early age. They learned that being loving meant always understanding others first, always giving another chance, always putting someone else's emotions ahead of their own. Over time, this creates a dangerous belief that suffering quietly is somehow proof of love. So the empath keeps tolerating emotional exhaustion because they think caring deeply means endlessly enduring pain without complaint. But eventually, their body and mind begin revealing a truth they can no longer ignore. Constant emotional stress changes them internally. Their nervous system stays overwhelmed, their thoughts become heavy, their peace disappears. Even small interactions start feeling draining because they spent so many years emotionally available without proper protection. And still, many empaths continue blaming themselves for feeling tired, instead of questioning the unhealthy expectations placed upon them. This is where healing begins changing their understanding of love completely. They start realizing that kindness should never require self-destruction. Real love does not demand that one person constantly sacrifices their emotional well-being while the other only receives. Healthy relationships create safety, respect, balance, and emotional care in both directions. The empath slowly begins understanding that overextending themselves endlessly was never proof of deeper love. It was proof that they forgot their own needs mattered too. And this realization can feel heartbreaking at first, because many empaths built entire relationships around being the strong one, the understanding one, the emotionally available one. Their identity became connected to helping, fixing, and carrying others. But now they begin seeing the difference between genuine compassion and self-abandonment. Compassion says, "I care about you." Self-abandonment says, "I will destroy myself to keep you comfortable." That difference changes everything. The empath starts choosing relationships where they can exist without constantly shrinking themselves emotionally. They stop viewing exhaustion as loyalty. Stop confusing emotional suffering with love. Stop believing they must earn connection through endless sacrifice. And slowly, for the first time in a long time, they begin treating their own heart with the same care, patience, and protection they always gave everyone else. Something remarkable begins happening when an empath finally starts protecting their energy. The constant emotional heaviness slowly begins lifting. Their mind feels quieter, their body feels calmer. The anxiety that once followed them everywhere no longer controls every moment of their day. For so long, many empaths lived in a state of emotional overstimulation without even realizing it. Their nervous system stayed alert to everyone else's moods, problems, and emotional chaos. They carried tension that was never theirs, absorbed stress they could not control, reacted emotionally to environments that constantly drained them. But once boundaries enter their life, everything internally starts shifting. The empath begins noticing how peaceful life feels when they stop giving every person unlimited emotional access. Conversations no longer leave them completely exhausted. Toxic energy becomes easier to recognize. They stop feeling responsible for fixing every painful situation around them. And because of that, their emotional stability slowly returns. For the first time in years, they begin hearing their own thoughts clearly again. Their emotions no longer feel tangled with everyone else's emotions. Their mind becomes less overwhelmed, their sleep improves, their energy lasts longer throughout the day. Even simple moments begin feeling lighter because they are no longer carrying invisible emotional weight everywhere they go. This inner transformation also changes the way they view themselves. Instead of constantly feeling guilty for needing rest, they begin respecting their limits. Instead of forcing themselves into emotionally draining spaces, they start choosing environments that protect their peace. They become more selective with relationships, conversations, and emotional investment. not from fear, but from wisdom. And slowly, the empath discovers something life-changing. Sensitivity was never the problem, lack of protection was. That realization gives them clarity they never had before. They stop absorbing every emotion around them like a sponge. They learn how to observe pain without becoming consumed by it. They learn that empathy does not require emotional suffering in order to be real. And as this healing deepens, the empathy starts becoming emotionally grounded in a way they once thought was impossible. In the end, the most powerful lesson an empath learns is not how to love harder. It is learning that their heart deserves protection too. For far too long, many empaths believed their purpose was to carry everyone else emotionally, even at the cost of their own peace. But healing changes that completely. They finally understand that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their energy, their kindness, or their emotional world. Some people will only appreciate the empath when they are overgiving. Others will only value them when they are sacrificing themselves. But true connection never requires self-destruction. Your empathy is rare. Your sensitivity is rare. The way you care for people deeply and genuinely is something this world desperately needs. But constantly draining yourself to save others was never the answer. Protecting your peace is not selfish. Choosing rest is not weakness. Creating boundaries is not cruelty. It is necessary for your emotional survival. The healed empath still loves deeply, still cares deeply. But now they understand something life-changing. A peaceful heart is more valuable than forced connection. And once an empath finally learns to protect their energy, they stop living in survival mode and start living with emotional freedom. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Empath Energy, and share this with someone who needs this reminder today. And always remember, the kindest souls become unstoppable the moment they realize their peace deserves protection too.